Okay, I was asked to be chairman of UKIP Brighton and Hove back in 2009, and we were struggling somewhat. There's only a handful of us, and I remember particularly Des and Linda, who's now our secretary, and Phil, who's now our treasurer. But we were determined to keep walking and talking, going to see people, trying to build up the party. And we've learned a lot of lessons in the last few years about what you do need to do if you're going to win. And that's our objective. Our objective is to win 3 members of Parliament for Brighton and Hove. That's Hove, Brighton Pavilion and Brighton Kemp Town. Now, I've just had a little wink that our guest has arrived, and I would like to say something. A long time ago, a man called Winston Churchill was handed the country right in the middle of Dunkirk, and through his own personality and his spirit and his courage, he managed to lead the country out of trouble. Now, to me, our leader is very similar to Winston Churchill. He's a man who's come at the right time to rescue us from being dominated by a foreign power and rescued us from a bunch of very incompetent politicians. I'd like to give you now our leader, Nigel Farage.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me clearly at the back? Good, thank you. Well, I have to say,
is that better? I could do without that, can I?
No, you keep that. That's for everyone.
Right, okay.
So this is the modern Labour Party and their defence of free speech. I can tell you firstly that Unite Against Fascism is funded by the trade union movement, who also fund the Labour Party, and it has on its board of deputies a whole list of Labour MPs and Labour MEPs. I want Ed Miliband to see these pictures tonight. Is this the face of the modern Labour Party in this country? Is this what democracy is all about? And I would also point out, if these people believe in democracy, they will sit down, they will hear an argument, and they will get their opportunity to give a counter-argument. Are you big enough to do that? Do you have the moral courage and confidence in your arguments to take me on in public debate? Yes or no? Well, if the answer is yes, then you're welcome to stay. But if the answer is no, and if you are down to hysterical ranting, then really, I think perhaps the audience ought to feel sorry for you, because you don't understand the hard-won and fought-for freedoms that made this a great country. Because the essence of free speech. Have you ever heard a political argument, madam? Or are you so filled with prejudice you're not prepared to listen to anybody else? I have to say, this is a very low-grade debate, isn't it? A very low-grade debate. Can we continue with this or not? Okay. Well, the first thing I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, is I have, over the course of the last 20 years, spoken at over 1,000 public meetings up and down the length of this country, and never in 1,000 meetings have I come across an attempt to stop UKIP from putting their argument, and shame on these people outside and in this hall. Shame on them. And I want to say, well done all of you for running the gauntlet and having horrible abuse thrown at you. Well done you for doing it. This of course all started north of the border a few weeks ago, as some of you might have noticed. And it was very entertaining. Very entertaining. What the crowd were saying was, you are a racist party and a racist politician, so sod off back to England where you belong and don't come and pollute our country. Said with no hint of irony, none whatsoever. And it's amazing. If you look at the current firmament of British politics today, there is one British political party that believes in democracy. There is one British political party that believes in free speech. There is one British political party that has opposed every single attempt to take away our rights of habeas corpus. You know, we don't believe the government should imprison us for weeks or months without first giving us a proper charge. There is one political party that has consistently defended individual liberty, and that party is UKIP. Because the other parties actually want to take away and hand away our freedoms to an unelected bureaucracy in Brussels. And I think that if you call yourselves Unite Against Fascism, ladies and gentlemen, you've chosen completely the wrong target. Completely the wrong target. We want to live in a smaller state. And we want that democracy, freedom and liberty not just to be for the people in this country, we want those freedoms for the rest of Europe too. And that is a really important plank that UKIP is standing for. Now I can of course let you all know dear oh dear. I can let you all know, though, why this is happening. And the reason this is happening is that what happened, I don't know, half the audience are busier clapping them out than listening to me. I don't know what to do here, really. Very good. Thank you, sir. Hurrah for you. Absolutely. But the reason this is happening, I will tell you why. It's because on May the 2nd this year, in the English County Council elections, up and down the length and breadth of England, UKIP produced a result that has absolutely shaken the lazy consensus politicians of this country to their very foundations. And what you are seeing here is fear. For a long time, there was the myth that UKIP voters, just ignore it, it'll go away, I promise you. For a long time, the myth was that UKIP was taking Conservative votes and that would help the Labour Party in this country. But actually, what you're seeing tonight are people in the Labour Party and some to the left of the Labour Party who actually realise that our basic message, which is that we are unashamedly a patriotic party, that we believe in standing up for the rights of individual men and women and their families in this country, that we hold no prejudice against anybody, regardless of where they've come from in the world, but that we absolutely insist that the time has come to end irresponsible, open-door immigration, something we have never had. Something we have never had in the history of these islands. And the basic UKIP message is this: that the European Union, the cost of it all, the regulation, what it's done to jobs, and what open-door immigration has done to the job prospects of young working-class people in this country, we are the party now standing up for good, ordinary Britons, millions of them from traditional Labour voting families, and they are now coming to UKIP in huge numbers too. That's why you've seen the protest tonight. And I have to say that if the level of political debate that we've seen this evening is the best they've got to offer, I think UKIP's in the pound seats, don't you? But just as I challenged Alex Salmond when he was in Scotland, just as I challenged Alex Salmond to condemn some of the awful aggressive behaviour we saw from the nationalists, I will now say this tonight. Given that Unite Against Fascism is funded by the very same trade union movements that fund the Labour Party, and given that most of the directors of Unite Against Fascism are Labour MPs or Labour MEPs, I want to ask publicly a question to Ed Miliband tonight. Ed, is this your modern Labour Party? Is this what the Labour Party have sunk to, or will you condemn this totally anti-democratic behaviour? And we'll wait for an answer. Unlike Alex Salmond, much as I disagree with Ed Miliband's politics, I think he is a decent man, and I very much hope that he does condemn the sort of gauntlet that you've all had to run this evening. Now, we've gained a great platform from those local elections because two very important things have happened. Firstly, you know, there have been millions of people over the last few years who've been happy and confident to vote UKIP in European elections. They say, well, it's proportional representation, so there's no such thing as a wasted vote. You know, my vote will count towards getting UKIP MEPs elected. But then they say, but you know, in local elections or in general elections, you know, county elections, whatever they may be, the trouble is, if I vote UKIP in this constituency, I might let the Lib Dems in. And other voters say, well, actually, you know, if we vote UKIP, perhaps we'll let Labour in. And people are really worried that if they vote for UKIP, somebody else might get in. And the big message that came out from David Cameron just before the elections and from Downing Street was, if you vote UKIP in the English counties, you will get Labour getting elected. But what happened on May the 2nd in many cases was, if you voted UKIP, you got UKIP actually winning those constituencies. And so I think as a consequence of that, the argument in future that a vote for UKIP is a wasted vote is an argument that is dead. But I must give one particular word of thanks. There was a little bit of unforeseen help that we got during the election campaign. No, madam, you could have provided it too, I've no doubt. But on the Sunday before the May elections, we were greeted with the sight of Kenneth Clarke in his back garden, looking like he'd been dragged through a hedge backwards after a heavy Saturday night. And Clarke chose not to play the ball, but to play the player, or in our case, the players. So rather than criticise UKIP's arguments, what Clarke chose to do was to denounce us as being a bunch of clowns. And I watched this on the monitor in a BBC studio, waiting to do something else, and virtually spat my coffee out, you know. And this wasn't with upset.